The mind of the crowd is always below average, never above. Imagine waking up one morning to find that nearly everyone you know is acting irrationally. Not just a little quirky, but truly disconnected from logic, reason, or even a basic sense of self. Now imagine realizing this isn't a dream, it's your everyday life. Consider this. What if you aren't the one who is crazy? What if you're the only sane person left in a world that has lost its mind? Today we will explore the uncomfortable and fascinating truth behind mass formation psychosis. How entire societies can fall into a hypnotic state of foolishness, illusion, and blind conformity. You'll learn why this happens, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to break free from its hold. Be sure to stay with us until the end, because the final insight is not only the most powerful, but may fundamentally change how you see everything, including yourself. If you find these kinds of revelations both important and necessary, please help spread this awareness. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share it with those you believe are ready to wake up. What you're about to discover has the power to transform not just your way of thinking, but your entire reality. Let us begin this journey of illumination. Let's start with a harsh truth. Human beings are not always rational. Despite having access to science, history, philosophy, and countless tools for critical thinking, we often behave like a flock of sheep chasing imaginary wolves. Throughout history, we have seen empires crumble, not from foreign enemies, but from collective delusions that destroyed them from within. This is not a new phenomenon. In the 17th century, philosopher René Descartes warned that our senses could deceive us, but he had no idea how profoundly a society could deceive itself. Today, psychologists call this phenomenon mass formation psychosis, a state where large groups of people lose touch with reality, becoming consumed by false narratives, emotional hysteria, or manipulative ideologies. But what causes this breakdown of reason? The brilliant psychiatrist Carl Jung described how the human psyche, when cut off from meaning, purpose, or a spiritual foundation, becomes susceptible to mass suggestion. In his view, when people are not anchored in their own identity, they seek it within the group. The group, unfortunately, is often driven by fear, propaganda, and the need to belong, even at the expense of truth. Think about the past few years with social media, news cycles, and cultural conflicts. We have watched people repeat slogans they don't understand, support movements they have never researched, and attack others simply for questioning the popular narrative. Is this intelligence? Is this progress? Or is this a society in a state of mental and spiritual collapse? The French philosopher Gustave Le Bon, in his classic book, The Crowd, explained that individuals in a group lose their sense of personal responsibility and critical thinking. Instead of acting like rational adults, they become emotionally charged children, easy to manipulate, quick to anger, and eager to conform. This is where the danger lies. The more disconnected people become from critical thought, the easier it is to control them. Mass psychosis is more than just a clinical term. It's a lived experience. It happens when people stop thinking for themselves and begin to outsource their perception of reality to authority figures, mass media, or popular trends. Ask yourself, how many of the opinions you hear every day are truly someone's own? How many are simply echoes of what they have been told to believe? This phenomenon intensifies when fear is introduced. Fear is the fuel of collective madness, and those in power, whether intentionally or not, have often used it to drive the group in whatever direction serves their interests. From religious crusades to political regimes, from economic panics to health crises, mass hysteria has been repeatedly manufactured and weaponized throughout history. But the most dangerous part of all this is that when you are surrounded by people who have surrendered to mass psychosis, they do not think they are crazy. They think you are. This reversal is chilling. Suddenly, questioning becomes dangerous. Curiosity becomes heresy. Silence becomes safer than truth. And in this environment, true intelligence and true sanity become isolated. So, what can we do? The first step is awareness. As Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, if we don't recognize the forces acting on our minds, we will never escape them. Mass psychosis feeds on passivity, on silence, on blind conformity. It thrives when people stop asking why. Have you noticed how difficult it is to have deep, rational conversations in today's world? Why do some people mock questions instead of answering them? Why is dissent so often labeled as hate? Why do those who speak inconvenient truths face more resistance than those who promote comforting lies? Could it be that we are not dealing with simple ignorance, but with a deliberate escape from reality? This escape is seductive. It promises a sense of belonging, safety, and identity. But at what cost? As we move forward, we will uncover the psychological mechanisms behind this mass delusion and how certain thinkers predicted this descent decades ago. We'll also explore how you can protect your own mind from being absorbed by this collective hypnosis. But most importantly, we will expose the final key, a powerful tool that very few dare to use, one that frees you completely. That is coming later in this video. So until then, reflect on this. Are your thoughts really your own? Or are they the thoughts of the crowd echoing inside your head? Take a moment to sit with that question. Let's go deeper. Think back to a time when you disagreed with the majority, not out of stubbornness, but because an inner voice told you, this doesn't feel right. Perhaps it was during a debate, while watching the news, or in a classroom when everyone applauded a concept you couldn't accept. You either stayed quiet or you spoke up and paid the price. This moment, though subtle, was a fracture, a glimpse into the mechanism that governs social conformity and silences inner truth. The human brain is designed not only for survival, but for belonging. Our ancestors needed the tribe. Exclusion meant death. This primal programming still exists within us today. But now, instead of fearing lions on the savannah, we fear being the odd one out. We fear ridicule, isolation, and judgment. Mass psychosis takes full advantage of this primal fear. Psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a famous experiment in the 1950s. He showed participants a series of lines and asked them to identify which ones matched in length. The correct answer was obvious. But when actors in the room purposefully gave the wrong answer, the real participants, under pressure, also gave the wrong answer just to conform. The need to fit in overpowered the evidence of their own eyes. Let that sink in. This is how mass psychosis begins, not with monsters and dictators, but with ordinary people afraid to stand alone. Now amplify that across millions of individuals. Multiply that fear by the reach of social media, the power of manipulated news, and the speed of modern communication. You now have a psychological virus, an epidemic of obedience, infecting minds at scale. But there's more. When people abandon their own thinking, they don't just become neutral, they often become aggressive. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned us, madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule. A society that suppresses truth doesn't become peaceful. It becomes hostile to those who tell the truth. This is why you'll notice a strange phenomenon. When someone calmly presents evidence, logic, or reason, the crowd reacts with rage, mockery, or censorship. Not because the information is wrong, but because it threatens the false safety of their illusion. This is not a matter of intellectual stupidity. Many people caught in mass delusion have degrees, titles, and status. But intelligence without awareness is like a ship without a compass. You can be brilliant and still be deeply lost. And here we reach the painful irony. We are surrounded not just by ignorance, but by educated confusion. Information is everywhere, but wisdom is scarce. People have facts but lack clarity. They know what to think, but not how to think. They mistake consensus for truth and compliance for virtue. This is not entirely their fault. Modern society is designed to distract. Schools teach memorization, not critical thinking. Media sells emotion, not accuracy. Social media rewards outrage, not wisdom. We are trained to react, not to reflect. So what's the antidote? It begins with reclaiming your mind. You must build an inner firewall, one that filters the noise, questions assumptions, and protects your inner clarity from being hijacked by the collective. Start by asking yourself uncomfortable questions. Why do I believe what I believe? Who benefits from me believing this? What if I'm wrong? Or what if everyone else is? And here's another. When was the last time I changed my mind because of new evidence, not social pressure? That question alone can shatter illusions. Carl Jung believed that one of the most dangerous things in life is to follow the crowd while believing you are thinking for yourself. He urged us to confront the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we deny. In today's world, the collective shadow is growing darker. Projection, blame, and hysteria are all signs of a society in psychological distress. But the key is this: you are not powerless. You are not destined to drown in this sea of madness. In fact, your awareness is the very lifeboat others are seeking, even if they don't know it yet. As you awaken from the mass illusion, you'll notice things others miss. The subtle manipulation in headlines, the emotionally loaded language designed to provoke rather than inform, the normalization of double standards, and the silence around inconvenient truths. You'll also notice something else: the deep loneliness that comes with seeing clearly in a blind world. This loneliness is not a curse, it's a rite of passage. Every awakened thinker has walked this path. From Socrates to Galileo, from Jung to Orwell, those who see beyond the illusion often walk alone. But here's the secret: they are never truly alone. Because in every era, there are others, quiet, questioning, watching, waiting for the moment to speak, to resist, and to rebuild. That moment is now, because the cost of staying silent is growing. The longer mass psychosis is allowed to spread, the more reality is distorted, and the harder it becomes to reclaim sanity. Children grow up without critical thinking. Truth becomes relative, and society becomes a stage play where no one remembers the script, only the roles they have been assigned. So ask yourself, am I living by truth or by fear? The next part of this video will reveal the psychological stages of mass psychosis, how it starts, how it evolves, and how it ends. We'll also explore the powerful, often suppressed techniques that can free you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually from this collective trap. Stay with us, because the final key, the one coming soon, is not just an idea, it's a revolution. To understand mass psychosis, we must first understand the individual psyche. A society is nothing more than a collection of minds reacting to fear, desire, and meaning. When a culture begins to unravel, when people lose trust in leaders, institutions, or even in each other, they become vulnerable. Anxiety rises, certainty fades. The old stories no longer make sense, and nothing has come to replace them. This is the fertile ground in which mass psychosis begins to grow. It starts with disorientation, a vague sense that something is wrong, but no clarity about what it is. The world feels chaotic. People feel helpless. In this fog, the mind begins to crave order, even if it comes at the cost of truth. The next stage is simplification. A narrative appears often from the media, the state, or charismatic influencers. It offers a clear villain, a clear solution, and a strong emotional charge. It tells you who to blame, what to fear, and what to do. Complexity is erased. Nuance disappears. Everything becomes black or white, good or evil, us versus them. At this point, many people surrender their critical thinking, Not out of stupidity, but out of exhaustion. To question everything is tiring. To follow the herd feels safe. Then comes the stage of conformity. The new belief system spreads, not because everyone believes it, but because everyone thinks everyone else believes it. And so, out of fear, they stay silent. Silence becomes complicity. This is what psychologists call pluralistic ignorance. The majority may secretly disagree with the dominant narrative, but since no one dares speak up, it appears as if everyone agrees. Dissent disappears, not because it's gone, but because it's hidden. The fourth stage is aggression. Once the new reality is accepted, those who still resist it are seen as threats. The crowd begins to enforce the new norms, not just socially, but emotionally and physically. Censorship increases, debate dies. The questioner becomes the enemy. This is why every totalitarian regime in history, no matter how irrational, had millions of supporters who believed they were fighting for truth and justice. The people weren't evil. They were trapped in a system that rewarded obedience and punished thought. But here's where it gets interesting. Mass psychosis doesn't last forever. Eventually, the weight of reality breaks through. Lies collapse under their own contradictions. People begin to feel the tension between what they are told and what they experience. The illusion cracks. That's when the fifth and final stage begins, awakening. At first, it's subtle. A quiet voice inside begins to ask, is this really true? And as more people begin to question, the collective spell starts to break. This awakening can be slow or sudden, and it is often painful. Why painful? Because waking up means realizing that much of what you believed, trusted, or even defended was false. It means seeing how you were manipulated. It means admitting how easily the mind can be hijacked. This cognitive dissonance, the gap between illusion and truth, can shake people to their core. And yet it is only through this shaking that clarity is born. The Austrian psychoanalyst Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that those who survived were not necessarily the strongest, but those who maintained a sense of inner purpose. They had meaning, something real within that the external madness could not destroy. And that's the key to escaping mass psychosis. You must anchor your mind to something deeper than public opinion. That might be a personal philosophy, a spiritual discipline, a dedication to truth even when it hurts. It must be something so rooted in your core that no slogan, trend, or narrative can override it. But this requires courage, because to see clearly in a world gone blind is not a comfortable experience. It is at times heartbreaking. You may lose friends. You may be ridiculed. You may feel alone. But ask yourself, would you rather be comforted by lies or awakened by truth? There's a reason many ancient traditions spoke of illumination or enlightenment not as blissful, but as disruptive. The light doesn't always feel good, especially when it reveals the shadows you didn't want to see. But once you see, you can't unsee. And that's the beginning of true freedom. Now let's turn to practical steps. How do you stay mentally sovereign in a time of mass hypnosis? The first step is silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of inner observation. Learn to watch your thoughts. Where did they come from? Are they grounded in evidence? Do they serve truth or comfort? This practice, rooted in Stoicism and Buddhism alike, is the gateway to psychological autonomy. Second, reduce emotional reactivity. Mass psychosis thrives on triggered minds. The more reactive you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Begin to question your immediate reactions. Why did that comment anger me? Why did that post make me afraid? Emotional discipline is not suppression, it's sovereignty. Third, reconnect with meaning. Whether through philosophy, spirituality, art, or nature, find what transcends the chaos. As Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Meaning is the antidote to manipulation. Fourth, build community, not of echo chambers, but of thinkers. People who value truth more than comfort. People who are willing to listen, to question, and to grow. One awakened mind is powerful, but many awakened minds connected by truth can change the course of history. Finally, prepare yourself for the last revelation, the one we promised in the beginning. Because the greatest escape from mass psychosis does not lie in resisting the crowd, but in transcending the need for a crowd altogether, and that we will explore in the final part. There is a moment in every seeker's life when the noise of the world fades and a new silence arises. It is not the silence of ignorance or avoidance, but the silence of realization. A clarity so piercing that for a brief moment everything makes sense. You see through the illusion, you recognize the madness, and most importantly, you recognize yourself. This is the final escape from mass psychosis, to transcend the need for approval, applause, and belonging. Because the deepest root of mass delusion is not the fear of truth. It is the fear of being alone with truth. When people fear isolation more than they fear falsehood, they choose lies. But when you learn to stand in your own presence, when your sense of self is no longer tied to the shifting winds of social consensus, you become free. True freedom is not rebellion. It's not simply rejecting the herd. It is the profound capacity to walk alone in clarity, without hatred, without despair, simply because truth has become your home. This is what mystics, sages, and philosophers across the ages have pointed toward. Not an escape from the world, but an awakening within it. Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, wrote, "The crowd is untruth." He wasn't advocating isolation. He was showing that truth begins in the individual, in the soul that dares to know itself without mirrors. When your identity depends on reflection, you are at the mercy of distortion. But when it is rooted in direct awareness, it becomes unshakable. And this is what terrifies those who dwell in mass psychosis. You cannot control a person who no longer fears rejection. You cannot silence a mind that has found its voice. Let's go deeper. Every system of mass control, whether political, ideological, or psychological, operates on one simple principle: divide the self, disconnect the person from their inner compass. Once they doubt themselves, they become susceptible to outside direction. But here's the secret. Your inner compass was never broken. It was buried under shame, guilt, fear, ridicule, and noise. And yet it remains. It always has. To escape mass psychosis, then, is not to become something new. It is to remember what you are. This is why awakening is so painful. It is not a discovery, it is a recovery, a return. And a return often requires grieving for the years lost in illusion, the connections built on falsehood and the truths we denied to survive. But grief is not the end. It is the doorway to strength. Because once you remember, truly remember who you are, beneath the programming, beneath the persona, a profound shift happens. You stop reacting. You start observing. You stop chasing approval. You start seeking alignment. You stop fearing others' madness. You start mastering your own mind. And from this space, you begin to radiate a new kind of energy. One that cannot be explained by credentials, social status, or charisma. It is the energy of coherence, of integrity, of truth embodied. Others will feel it. Some will be drawn to it. Others will be threatened by it. But it doesn't matter because your peace no longer depends on their perception. This is the ultimate escape. Not fleeing from the world, but no longer needing it to validate you. And it is from this place, not from rage, not from resistance, but from clarity, that real transformation begins. You become the antidote to mass psychosis, not by preaching, not by arguing, but by living as proof that another way is possible. When others see that you are not afraid to question, not afraid to be wrong, and not afraid to stand apart, They begin to remember something in themselves, something ancient and sacred. This is how awakening spreads, not by force, but by resonance. And this is what mass psychosis fears most, the awakened individual, because one individual, truly awake, deeply rooted and immune to fear, has more power than 10,000 confused minds. So if you've come this far, you are not like the rest. You are part of a quiet rebellion, a rebellion of clarity, compassion, and consciousness. A rebellion that cannot be televised, cannot be weaponized, and cannot be controlled. It begins with questions, it deepens with truth, and it ends not with conquest, but with liberation. The liberation of your mind, the liberation of your soul, the liberation of your life. So now ask yourself, what kind of world do you want to live in? One ruled by noise, hysteria, and blind obedience, or one where individuals are awake, courageous, and sovereign? It starts with you. Speak your truth even if your voice shakes. Stand your ground even if you stand alone. Because the world doesn't need more clever followers. It needs conscious leaders. And you, if you choose, can be one of them. This is the way out, not through panic, but through presence. Not through rage, but through remembrance. And not through escape, but through evolution. Let the madness of the world rage on if it must. You have found something deeper. You have found yourself. And in doing so, you have already begun the revolution. Thanks for looking.